The Tennessee Volunteers had not named their quarterback yet, and now we know Faizon Brandon is
Let's
going to be QB1
go.
over there in Rocky Top.
Yeah, I can hear it now, and
What?
quarterback, a true freshman from Greensboro, North Carolina, number 11, Faizon Brandon.
And the
102,000
crowd
people
goes
screaming their lungs
crazy.
out. Yeah, it's game time here on Rocky Top. So a very exciting news, of course. Going to drop that early on a Monday morning,
Yeah.
and then at least they did it before Heupel spoke. Sometimes they're mean and will hey, let Heupel talk and then release it later in the day. But got to hear from Coach Heupel on that decision yesterday, and exciting times because I think everybody right now goes, okay, that means that we are now set up, for a championship window over the next couple of years if all pans out. So, this is what we
Let's
look
go.
forward to. We'll see how this season goes, but yeah, a lot of exciting news on this one. I think everybody who really knows and has been around the program this offseason thought this was one, the logical decision. Two, hey, if you bring a five-star quarterback in, and you want them to be the future of your program, then you probably expect them to start if there's not, somebody who's well experienced ahead of them. George McIntyre obviously, has played very limited snaps in his time as a freshman last year, redshirt freshman this year. So it all made sense that this is the direction that they are going. The ability, the freak nature, the stuff that we haven't been able to see in practice, we'll be able to see that in just a couple weeks in the season opener. So exciting time. I think this is what fans thought was going to happen. And now they're excited because they can go, that's our guy. This is who we're rolling with. And this is the future.
Yeah, very exciting times on Rocky Top. This is the first time Tennessee has had a true freshman quarterback since 2004. Does that scare you at all? Excite you? What are your feelings there?
I was thinking about that this morning, and I'm watching and seeing the different headlines of this NFL player is leaving training camp to come back to college football, and this ninth year senior, and this guy's deciding to leave his career as pro, and I'm like, man, like if this just having a true freshman starting quarterback, a teenager,
Yeah.
an 18-year-old quarterback as the starter of your franchise and going, man, this is college athletics. This is the game that we know and love. That hey, this isn't a professional. This is somebody who's just become a legal adult and is now in charge of running the offense in one of the most storied programs in the history of college football. A program that's won national championships, had Peyton Manning, General Nealon. That's when you're like, man, this is college football. A teenager is our starting quarterback. He is in
Yeah.
charge of this offense. I think that's kind of something that Vol fans are going to be able to get behind.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what the play is going to look like yet. You're hoping it all pans out. I'm sure he's going to take a lot of lumps this year. I'm sure he's going to have a learning curve. I'm sure he's not going to look like a Heisman right out of the gate. He's going to have some issues to work out. He's going to have some connections with his receivers. He's going to once he takes that first hit, whether that's week 1 or week 5, whether he gets his bell rung, whatever week it happens in, we're going to have to see the adjustments there. But right now, I just think, man, you're excited. You got your guy. You know who it's going to be. What will that look like moving forward? We don't know. But right now, we know this is the guy, and we know that we're planning on him being the starter for the next 3 years if all pans out.
I find it so interesting that of I'll say 4 quarterback battles that have been decided. I know there was a 5th in Aaron Philo winning the job down there in Florida, but of 4 quarterback battles that were decided in the last few days, I'll go Arkansas, Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 of those cases, the coaches ended up going with the younger, more inexperienced guy rather than the system QB that's been there for a while. The only one that didn't was Vanderbilt, naming Blaise Berlowitz the starter for the Austin Peay game, although I think that Clark Lee is just using that as a preseason game at this point. Do you think Tennessee ultimately made the right decision?
I do, and I think if Joey Aguilar is in this system, I think we would be absolutely floored if Faizon Brandon somehow beat out the guy that, led the conference in passing. I don't think, when you have an option of a redshirt freshman versus, a senior who's been in the system, been able to see, okay, Vanderbilt has kind of worked their way into, one of the better teams of the conference. Obviously, last year you got a Diego Pavia in the mix that, kind of changes the dynamic 2.0 of everything. Now. Hey, we'll see what that looks like. But at least, hey, this team, they got a taste of what winning is like. And he's been a part of that. And he kind of knows what Clark Lea's expectations are. So this one's not as surprising to me. But it's also one of these where, this is, you can kind of use an example of the Las Vegas Raiders. You got a guy that's, Kirk Cousins, and that he can play football. Like, is he going to, lead you to a Super Bowl? Probably not, but he can play football with the right guys around him and the right system in place. He can win you some football games. Fernando Mendoza's the future. And, there's also a possibility that by week 4 this season, Fernando Mendoza starting, there's a good chance that, Jared Curtis is starting by week 4 this season if things don't work out. But I think you're safer to go with the senior quarterback in that specific scenario, in that Vandy scenario where they also go, hey, last year we, broke all kinds of records within our program, and we don't want to take a major step back. Everybody in the conference is predicting us, in that 12 to 16 range. That means they think that we are back in the bottom tier of the SEC. So I think if you feel like you're Clark Lea and you don't want to take a crazy step back, you don't want to get back into a complete rebuild, let the senior start. And then, if Curtis finds his way into the rotation later this year, all good. But I think as far as the Vols go, this is the right decision. Whether George stays here, you don't even know what this season looks like. Any given play. Away. Right, one snap away from, a complete change. A couple years ago, Vol fans thought that Nico was going to be the 3-year plan for this team. And, that clearly did not work out the way that things intended. So you never know. Yeah. When he committed, Nico was the starting quarterback in 2024, and he stuck with it the long way, and it worked out for him. And now he's going to be starting the first game of his collegiate career as an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah, Sam. So now that we know that Faizon Brandon is going to be the QB1, does that change your expectations at all for this season, or you still feel kind of the same way?
I think it's still too unpredictable. I think this is a team that has the makeup to be a 7 to 9 win team. If he comes out and he's okay, this is a young Cam Newton, somebody who's
right.
70%, and I'm not going to throw out, okay, he's, Heisman season Cam Newton, but if this guy has the makeup to be somebody of that caliber, he shows flashes of being somebody that's just utterly incredible. Hey, that ceiling, could go a little bit higher. And hey, Bama, LSU, Texas, all 3 of those games are at home. You get 2 of those, we're looking at a playoff team. Yeah. You win 1 or none of those, this could be a 7-win season instead of a 9 or 10-win season. So I don't think it changes my expectations at this point. And I don't think that my expectations will be changed through the first 2 weeks of the season either, whether the Vols are 2-0. Now, if they're 0-2 or if, they lose and it's an ugly game in Georgia Tech, my expectations will lower. But my expectations, I don't think as far as, okay, this is now a playoff team, will really, I don't think they'll change until we see something drastic against Texas in that week 4 matchup.
Yeah.
We'll get into the Arian Carter situation and his suspension being reduced here in a second. But I keep on looking into this Georgia Tech game, and the more I do my research on it, the more cool, tidbits I get to find it. Is it not sort of poetic in a way that Faizon Brandon's first road start in college football is going to come at Bobby Dodd Stadium, who's named after the legendary Tennessee quarterback and Bobby Dodd? Isn't college sports just the greatest?
Yeah, no, it really is. That's going to be a fun one for sure. For all intents, we've talked about, hey, it's not a Mercedes-Benz. This is a true road game. We've been having all the conversations in recent years, as the SEC, step back, what does it look like when they play some of these other non-conference opponents earlier on in the season, whether that's, obviously the Big Ten, who has got a serious claim to being the best conference in college football. And then, hey, we never, you claim to be superior over the ACC, but you never play each other in the regular season. So how do we really know? I think this is, going to be one of those games where you see, okay, this is a team that we expect to be kind of middle upper of the pack in the SEC, a team that we expect to be kind of middle upper of the pack, in the ACC. What does that look like? I think Tennessee believes that they've got the talent to go down and pick up a win that's maybe a double-digit win. We'll see, what that looks like. Certainly having your leader on the defense helps quite a bit. I talked about the linebacker depth, where I thought, okay, Tennessee still should believe that they're the favorites going into that game without Arion Carter. Now having him back, I think you really kind of go into that matchup and you're like, man, yeah, we're the better team. We should win this game. There's no reason that we shouldn't be rolling into week 4 3-0 against Furman, against Georgia Tech, and against Kennesaw State before Texas comes to town.
Yeah, well, speaking of Arion Carter, his suspension is now only going to be for the first game of the season. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that is big time. Arion Carter. I mean, of course, if you're a Vol fan, you'd love to see that be 0, but this is just another one of those things where it's, hey, we kind of just are just throwing things around at the wall and seeing if they'll stick as far as the NCAA goes. Hey, this is a broken rule. We're going to say 3 games. Okay, you appealed. Let's say 2 games. Okay, you guys complained enough and things are happening that are, crazy enough around the college football landscape. Literal NFL players who have signed contract are coming and playing in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah.
And they're going to be eligible to play this year. Okay, well, let's just make it 1 game, we're not going to completely fold. We're not going to completely go, okay, Josh Heupel got on and said a curse word and now we're intimidated, we're going to drop him off. But no, this just really is just utter lunacy, at this point, where you're happy that you got, a guy for the Georgia Tech game, the Furman game, like whatever, you'd love to have him for that game, especially for a guy who's now in his final season of college football. Every game matters being played in Neyland Stadium for just yourself, for personal, for stats, for everything. This is a guy that could finish, higher on the list of all-time players at Tennessee, and you pull that game away against a non-conference opponent where he could finish with 15, 16 tackles, that could diminish his legacy. But no, it's big time for the Vols. You don't need them to win against Furman. You potentially do need them to win against Georgia Tech, so that's a big one. But Faizon Brandon, that's an exciting moment for him, and Arion Carter. Good news on both ends for the Vols start off this week. So hopefully that carries on to the start of the regular season.
When you were giving that explanation, I could hear the clown music going on, in my ear just very slightly about the whole NCAA and, the circus is continuing over there. You talked about how this team has the makings of a 7-9 win season. And I think, in my opinion, that if they were to hit their goal of 9 to maybe even 10 wins this season, you cannot lose a game that you should win. And when you take a look at their schedule this season, which game is a must win or a should win game that truly scares you the most?
Yeah, the one that has immediately come to my mind and multiple times talking about the season is Auburn, but clearly there's several on here in that mix where I think Georgia Tech, Auburn, Arkansas, South Carolina, all of those games, I think you're a little, I don't know about, and we'll see as the season goes along how worried you are or not. But, Tennessee a couple years ago, they dropped one on the road at Arkansas. Going to South Carolina, that's always a ruckus environment, and you're kind of coming off that Bama game. You never know where the emotions are. Say Tennessee beats Alabama at home and they're riding high and, they're feeling like, okay, we're right in the mix of the college football playoff. And then you head to South Carolina and you come out flat. That's one that, potentially just as far as the schedule goes, could drop. But for me, it still is that Auburn game. The Texas emotions are going to be high all across the board. It's your first SEC game. Win or lose, as long as you're not getting blown out in that game, emotions, just as far as, okay, we competed well, we think that we're right in the mix as one of the better, teams in the conference, or we won this game, we pulled off an upset, and now we genuinely feel like, we are one of the better teams in the country, and we got a true freshman quarterback. Emotions are going to be high. You roll into Auburn. You got these new smoky gray jerseys that, sometimes we don't want to wear against a conference opponent. We wore those against New Mexico State last week. So I think it's still the Auburn game is number one for me on that mix, but there's a handful in there that, depending on how the week prior goes, could really be a trap game.
Are you in or out on these? Because we're out on them.
I like it. I just wish there were gray
pants have to be gray.
The pants need to be gray, and then it'd be great.
There's a lot going on. And I love in general when teams really, try to find something like, okay, we're giving the nod to General Neyland. And I think that's cool. Okay, we're the highlight mix with, General Neyland and hearing him talk and, the leather helmet, like the idea is cool. And I think in general, smoky gray is a fine alternate, but I feel like you probably should pick a year. Hey, this year we're going to be in our grays, and next year we're going to have our blacks. I think at this point, the spooky Rocky Top, the blackout, the dark mode jerseys, those have kind of become a staple. So I feel like, hey, just stick to one alternate jersey. You can have one game a year where, you have the alternate, and, fans get excited for that. That's kind of my thoughts in general. Mm-hmm. There's been some renditions of the smoky gray that I think have been better than some of the dark mode jerseys, and it kind of, when you just think, like, dark mode's really cool in general, just the theatrics that they do around it. The gray is probably more themed toward Rocky Top and the Smoky Mountains and stuff, but some of these jerseys, there's just too much going on, and I think in this one there's a little bit too much going on.
We go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's kind of the consensus we had, but I do like the gray. I just wish they would have matched with the gray pants. Like, the white just feel out of place.
It's like those Bills jerseys that is just like I think it was one year they had helmets that just did not go with the jerseys at all. I'm like, what in the world are you thinking? Like, this looks awful.
Yeah, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you got the Bumblebees on and Ben Roethlisberger's thrown for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, they're the best jerseys that I've ever had. But if Alex Golesh, if he comes into Neyland Stadium and beats his former head coach and you're wearing the smoky grays,
never again.
Fans are going to say, get rid of the smoky grays and never wear them again.
Get them out of here. If we lose 70 to 40, get them out of here. I never want to see them again. Last thing before we let you go, I know obviously in Gabriella's world, she thinks that the Vols are a college football playoff contender, but seeing the highlights from David Gabriel Georges over the weekend.
We're winning the national championship next year.
I feel like that has to put less pressure on this season, just because that you've got a guy waiting in the wings that's going to come in next year.
He made national news this weekend.
But here's the thing, though. Like, I feel like this season it's about, hey, okay, let's go ahead and get Faizon Brandon one full season in the SEC. If we go 9-3, absolutely great. If we go 7-5, at least he has some, playoff experience, so to speak, even though it is a bowl game.
Yeah.
But just seeing the highlights come out from last Friday, I mean, does that not make you really excited to be a Tennessee fan for next year? I know I don't want to punt on this season, but it's hard to not get excited about that.
No, I am one, I'll joke with you guys about, hey, we're analyzing too many passes at fall camp and, everything's coming down. Watching that game with David Gabriel George, and watching his highlights, that one game film could have been a whole year of highlights for any other player in the country, and they would have had an offer from every school in the country based on that one game of tape.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here going, man, Tennessee's paying a running back $2 million that's, never stepped foot on campus. This is a kid that, who knows what'll happen. And, at this point, you're just praying that he stays healthy. You're praying, hey, please stay healthy. I watched that tape and I'm going, this is the best. I've seen incredible high school football players in Florida, 5 stars, 4 stars. Plays. You could have put 4 of those plays on SportsCenter top 10 and I had no problem with it. So again, the future with Faizon, if everything pans out this year, you win 7 games this year, but you lose a couple of close ones to, Texas, A&M on the road. You're just left outside of the playoff. You maybe at 8 or 9. You're just left outside of the 8 wins. A couple don't go your way. You miss the playoff, but you're going, okay, we're bringing, Braylon Staley, we're bringing Mike Matthews, maybe Deshaun Bishop comes back for his senior year, and you pair him with a true freshman. That is a team that right now, on paper, enters the season top 10 at least heading into next year.
Yeah.
I would say that it's the best high school highlight tape that I've seen, but I have to be a little bit biased down here because we just had a guy that went to school about 50 minutes north of the station, and EJ Crowell, and he's up at Alabama now. If you saw some of those highlights from those games last year, I mean, he hurdled a dude in a game, and he played half the game in every single game, and he still set the state record for rushing yards because he was just literally, hey, here, hand the ball off to me 5 times a game. I'll run for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then I'll, take the second half of the night off. I mean, I have never seen anything like it, like at least since Derrick Henry. Like, we're talking Derrick Henry level.
The difference is I've seen a lot of high school players run for 500 yards, but they're doing it against, a lot of guys that look like me on the field, whereas DGG is somebody who's out there playing against other Division I athletes and will be doing that every single week because that's just the type of schools that Baylor plays each week. So when we're watching that film, we're not watching him against scrubs. We're watching him against other guys who will be playing on Saturdays or even Sundays in the future.
All I'm going to say is when EJ Crowell runs for 200 yards on the Tennessee Volunteers this year, we'll come back to this conversation.
All right, sounds good.
Sam, always appreciate having you on, and looking forward to catching up with you next week.
Thanks, guys.